Moving on, let's talk about manure. And so to start, I do want to talk about the benefits of manure, because a lot of people may see it as an inconvenience, but there are a lot of things it has to offer. First off, horse manure is going to provide nutrients. It can be used for crops, forage, gardens. It's really this very nutritious, very beneficial product that when used correctly, it can be great. In a year, a 1,000-pound horse can produce about 100 pounds of nitrogen, 43 pounds of phosphorus, and 77 pounds of potassium, which generally is useful for about, depending on the soil you have, but for about 1 acre of land to help fertilize it. And so it can really provide those nutrients for about half the space that the horse should be consuming during the grazing season. It also has other ways that it can benefit soil quality. It provides improved water holding capacity. This is through the increased organic matter that it offers. It creates more nutrient stability. So it's, think about manure versus like a granular fertilizer. It's going to be more of a slow release of those nutrients. And then in addition to just the nutrients, it's also going to offer a strong microbe population. And those microbes are really critical in helping get those nutrients released and help creating an environment instead of just supplying the nutrients. Okay. So manure, it's great when it is used correctly. There are going to be some detriments, however. The first we've talked about a few times is parasite exposure. If I'm going to be using manure without composting it, I am going to be spreading any parasites that were shed in that manure around. So composting it first is going to be the most ideal. We also see insects associated with the manure. So even when looking at parasites, we had our stomach bots that ended up being bot flies, right? That can be involved. But ultimately, flies in general, eggs are hatching within a week. So when we don't have controlled manure, we are going to have more insects present. We may see odors associated with manure. So it is important for timely removal, a good storage location, good ventilation, things to keep your neighbors happy. Making sure you're storing it in the right spot so you're not right on your neighbor's property line and you're not, they're not downwind of you. Those can be certain things that we pay attention to with manure. If you're out on a 50-acre plot of land, that's going to be different. For us, we have 5 acres and we're in a development. So we do have quite a few neighbors all the way around us. And so it is very important for us that we don't want to be a nuisance. And then we also have a process called eutrophication that we want to pay attention to. So what is eutrophication? So I like this image that goes through and explains what eutrophication is. But ultimately, it is going to be when excess nutrients are available. So let's say in manure, more nutrients are needed than what plants need to produce energy through photosynthesis. And so these excess nutrients often are coming from our phosphorus and our nitrogen from either fertilizers or manure. And what we see is over many years, and it can be sped up by human activities such as fertilizing or spreading manure, nitrogen and phosphorus end up traveling to these bodies of water. So whether that's a stream, a pond, or so on, when we see these nutrients reaching bodies of water, this is when we see this eutrophication process happening. When these excessive nutrients come and they reach this body of water that we have, they can lead to rapid growth of algae. And so we end up seeing these algae blooms. And extra nutrients increase phytoplankton. We see these algae blooms produced. and it is going to block out sunlight penetration. So now we see this sunlight penetration. We see any aquatic plant life is dying underneath. We're going to be altering the availability of oxygen that's available. And we also see that when these algae blooms die, they die off. We see this decomposition process happening. As they decompose, we're moving oxygen in to help that decomposition process, and we're decreasing the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. Okay, this is called a dead zone. So we see a lack of oxygen to support most organisms living in that water. We see this blocked sunlight. It ultimately just creates this unlivable space in the water. And so I would say it is getting a little bit more attention of how our livestock are impacting our bodies of water. And I would say, at least up here, I've been seeing tighter regulations in terms of what you're allowed to do with farmland and pasture land near those bodies of water. So I wanted to point this out, not that you need to fully understand this process, but knowing that manure that is going to be produced by our horses, or fertilizer that's going to be spread, if you are near a body of water, it's important to be aware of how those nutrients can impact the body of water, and not in a good way. And so making sure you're responsible as you're managing that. If I have this hill leading down to this body of water, I'm not going to be wanting to apply manure or fertilizer there that will run off into that body of water. I'm going to be a little bit more conservative of the nutrients that I'm using.